Okay, here we're moving into lesson 8. So this is professional course booklet number 8 if you're using the booklets, Conquest of Illusion. Or if you're using the hardcover textbooks, lesson 8 is the final lesson within Pathway to Ascension Volume 1. So we're basically approaching halfway, the midway point in the processing levels for beta defragmentation. Um, so let's just get right into this here. Our practice of systemology toward ascension is effective for the simple fact that at the core, in our most basic state, the alpha spirit is actually quite righteous and good. And this is what allows us to rehabilitate, well, abilities and restore these levels of awareness that we've been referring to and that we're working incrementally for. We're now midway in level 3. And so level 3 will, by the end of lesson 8, will actually be completed with level 3. So, but there's nothing being added again to self while using the pathway. It's actually the additives that have been accumulated along one's spiritual existence that are being removed. That's what we're doing with defragmenting. And so in doing so, we're removing the barriers and the blockages of our true state. And so we've already kind of talked about in the last lesson, we kind of started treating the preliminaries of the idea of eliminating barriers. And so in this one, we kind of continue in this area. And a lot of the material for lesson 8 is actually derived from, I mentioned it in a previous lesson, the research volume titled Way of the Wizard. So, and we talked about, in the last lesson, we talked about shared game universes. So, at the inception, in the very beginning of the shared game universes, alpha spirits went to great lengths to basically trick and deceive one another. This is because during our early experiences as godlike beings, before we consider ourselves to be attached to any kind of body that could be harmed, the idea of deception and trickery is about all you could really do to one another, as a godlike being. So illusions, in this lesson we talk about conquest of illusion, and illusions were originally created for fun and entertainment. Similar to like going to the movies or attending a stage magic show. Remember that at basic, we as alpha spirits have a uniquely strong fondness for games. And it's later on, more recently on the backtrack of our spiritual existence, that things have become, more serious. And these illusions have started to be used as a means of basically entrapping and enslaving one another. So this is not an easy area for many to handle or process, and that's not to say it's impossible. But as I mentioned when we started approaching the doing this factor and willingness to do, in Conquest of Illusion, we start treating what we generally just refer to at the Systemology Society as personal integrity. But that generally means integrity processing. So we're starting to get a little bit deeper into, the things that one has done and been involved in, both in this lifetime and, of course, anything along. We've talked about the chains of fragmentation. So the first areas that we'll take up, and there isn't a lot of diagramming for me to do here in this lesson. Most of this lesson, actually, in your booklet or in your textbook, is straight processing. We've introduced the preliminaries and the concepts behind various processing and even introduced its application to various areas. So there's a lot of just straight processing in this lesson. And I'll introduce some of the PCLs and so forth, but really to get a complete sense of the practices you're going to want to work from some kind of publication. So confusion and falsehoods. Is our first area to take up in this lesson. So, it can sometimes be quite challenging to differentiate between truth and falsehood, or to effectively dispel illusion. We've all had a lot of experience in mastering these skills. I mean, trickery and illusion is also used to conceal the true native state that's available to us as the alpha spirit. So fragmentation is what we give a catch-all phrase to when it regards these kind of blockages and barriers, but it's what hinders us from having the highest realization of ourselves. And whatever it is that is hindering us, it must be entirely composed of illusion and falsehood. So our experience on the backtrack in this lifetime and others has afforded us a great bit of fragmentation concerning all sides of this area. You know, what has been done to us and what we have done to others, and also what we've observed with others handling reality. So some of what we would appear to be, basic processing in this lesson is really intended to simply just get a seeker to kind of recognize the facets associated with the various areas that have, contributed to holding them back from full realizations of self. And again, that's, the realization of self in self-honesty, free of fragmentation, free of compulsion, free of inhibition, and so forth. So when an individual knows they are not susceptible to falsehood, we talked about knowingness and so forth. It's only after an alpha spirit agrees to not know, and of course this is to have a game, that they fall prey to trickery and deception. And one of the ways the alpha spirit might be fooled is through misdirection, or misdirection of attention, what we generally just refer to as distraction. It's this mechanism that allows, for example, a stage magician to fool an audience and conceal what's really going on. So there's also the matter of confusion. So when one is in a state of confusion, they're quite likely to reinforce the solidity of the fragmentation in their lives simply by reaching for the wrong pieces of data, in order to stabilize and orient themselves. These states of confusion are so undesirable that an individual will basically just grab a hold of anything that might bring some kind of resolution to the situation, just to resolve the confusion without even analyzing or reviewing the contents. And this is one way in which a person might be misled or manipulated to agree with false data, because remember, we're always going back to the reality agreements and so forth. The data itself is just data, but when one starts to actually agree to it as reality, well, then one's made a high-powered consideration about that data. So one of the most basic ways an individual oversees illusion and falsehood is simply by recognizing it as it is, and we put that kind of up there as the high power of all processing, to basically just being able to see things as it is. And this does become simpler to do as you elevate along the pathway, elevate actualized awareness, are able to put more high level awareness into and presence into the session, into the practice of what you're doing. So in upper levels, when an individual has almost, once we resolve beta defragmentation, a lot of alpha defragmentation is basically just, it's defragmented on site, by inspection. Just that much high-powered awareness is going into it, and that knowingness, and having already, traversed, all this, the 7 levels leading up to that, up at the higher reaches, we're able to, basically devour and disintegrate this kind of stuff with no issues. But we've got to work ourselves up to that point. And so to continue to use the practices that we've been already establishing, for this course, we can easily just apply, again, analytical recall, as we refer to it. And it seems like a very basic technique, but what we're just doing is using it as a structured way of again, spotting, noticing, confronting, and so forth. So there's 1, 2, 3. Well, we could go through these. So there's some PCL here, and again, these are run as a cycle. They're based on the circuits. You should be familiar with those by now. And running the circuits as a cycle and just kind of repetitively targeting a certain area instead of just staying on it with one flow. So the first area we have here, and these all regard falsehood now. The first is trickery and fighting. So the first one, recall a time when you tricked someone into fighting. Number 2, recall a time when someone tricked you into fighting. Number 3, recall a time when someone tricked others into fighting. And then the next process for falsehood regards distraction and attention. The first one, recall a time when you intentionally shifted someone's attention. Number 2, recall a time when someone intentionally shifted your attention. 3, recall a time when someone intentionally shifted another's attention. And then the third one here, it actually says falsehood and confusion. So this is actually combined. Recall a time when you confused someone, recall a time when someone confused you, and recall a time when someone confused others. Now, as an additional exercise in identifying the ideas that we've kind of used to resolve or reduce confusion, you consider the following is recall a confusion and what idea resolved or reduced that confusion. So another way of approaching it with analytics. So there's always going to be people in our societies that instigate or propagate confusion, falsehood, and suppression. This isn't unique only to life here on this planet. There's innumerable times in history when conflict or confusion was encouraged for someone's personal gain or to eliminate an opponent. In many ways, this is an inherent part of games, and it involves players that are perceiving themselves in competition with each other. Information is easily mishandled or miscommunicated. Whether intentionally given or otherwise, misinformation or false data is inherently fragmentation. It contributes to our having a false perception of our environment and subsequently our making inaccurate evaluations when participating, acting and doing things over the course of our existence. So fragmentation, any fragmentation, it reduces awareness and clarity and also memory. So again, recall being a good way of accessing some of this at the start. So one of the ways in which falsehood is spread is by passing the buck. And what we mean is when blame is misplaced onto some individual or a family or a group or a society or even a race or a country, and it's a misdirection of attention, again, from a true source and to a false source. And then, this is, of course, again, by acknowledging that or validating that, rather, it disguises the real origination of an action. And so, when I talked about, the high power seeing things as it is, or basically what we say is what is, some of the highest power defragmentation processing is very simply high powered attention on what is, and secondly, source, being able to identify source. So those are once you actually peel back the layers in beta defragmentation, there's like two real elements to what an individual at that actualized level is really doing if they're continuing to defragment or process things as they go along. And again, that's identifying source and identifying what is. And technically, almost all of the work that we do and all of the processing and targeting specific areas and so forth is really basically a preliminary or roundabout or a way of doing just that, just not necessarily as directly. So the PCL get more direct, as time goes on, as one's able to just focus that much more on to a particular target, contact it, defragment it. So now another commonly used tactic is to misdirect or shift the data around concerning the date or timing of an event, replacing actual data with invented data. And this not only obscures the facts, but it can also It can be used to diminish or exaggerate the significance of the data, such as representing events as being longer ago than they actually are, or so forth. And when we get into confronting the past, one of the ways in which an incident has to be, resurfaced or brought up and contacted for defragmentation is our ability to target the exact time that it took place, to be able to actually do that. So again, an individual has to defragment what is there. That's why this doesn't work by some supernatural magic words or waving a wand. An individual has to peel back enough layers to pull up something that's there to defragment it. The kinds of coding and programming and implanting and considerations and alpha thought that's entrapping us is very deeply buried. Unfortunately, myself and others of a similar kind have put the majority of their existing lifetimes and or more into uncovering this the exact means in which this can be done. And again, across the boards, is this the only way in which it could probably be done? No, but it is the only way we've found that can be evenly communicated, again, across the boards universally, and apply, when you start from the bottom and work up to any level, any background. So the following processes again employ analytical recall, and this just assists a seeker in recognizing and identifying the presence of misdirection and manipulation in their own lives and in memory or on the backtrack. Again, we're just making a light pass through this material at first, not just for the sake of this course and my delivering the education, but when you practice it, we make a light sweep through what's available, and then these same processes can be used to basically track those chains of fragmentation back towards deeper and deeper levels of uncovering that knowingness. A lot of attention in the New Age and various schools of thought have put so much emphasis on just the past lives and the past lives and the past lives, when the truth is the person can't confront the stuff that they can't confront today, and they can't confront yesterday, and they're worried about past lives. So the proper way of unlocking that knowingness is by peeling back these layers, and then it doesn't become just a parlor trick or something you're trying to do as some kind of New Age remedy. The uncovering of past lives is essentially almost all of the phenomenon attached to the pathway of ascension is a byproduct of applying the pathway to ascension. It isn't a target of uncovering past lives. Past lives become uncovered when one traces back the fragmentation that's been affecting them. Because the truth remains, although we might like to think so, and it might be easy to again misplace the blame and misplace direction and source, but very little of what is wrong with us is likely taken place in this incarnation, in this lifetime. All this has done is basically just keep triggering and stimulating and keep pushing the buttons that have been installed farther into the past. So it's those buttons that we're trying to treat. That's why this isn't a psychotherapy to just make someone feel better about going about their miserable, condition. This is about resolving the condition. So we got falsehood here, shifting blame. First one, recall a time when you tried to shift blame onto another. Number two, recall a time when someone tried to shift blame onto you. And then recall a time when someone tried to shift blame onto another. And then I talked about the shifting time. The same ones there, recall misleading about the time when something occurred, someone else doing it, and so forth. Shifting significance, you run through the same with the shifting of significance. A time when you exaggerated the importance of something or downplayed the importance, and then when someone else did. So I'm just trying to breeze through these quickly. I'm not actually trying to that'll be a whole nother set of workshops or something. This isn't a group processing session, so I'm not trying to issue these as if it's a practice. I'm just trying to educate on their use and try and get you through the textbook material. So embarrassment and shame, a time when you made another embarrassed, when someone made you embarrassed, when someone made another embarrassed. False accusations, the time you falsely accuse someone falsely accused you, someone falsely accusing another or others. Encouraging conflict. Now this one I'll actually run through here. Step A, spot a time when you were told that someone or something was bad. Step B, identify the person that told you that. Step C, did that person have personal interest involved, and how so? So again, targeting sources, tracking information, tracking data, analyzing data, treating what we were actually agreeing to as real, bit by bit. Here's a good alternation one for true and false. Spot something, and by spot, again, this doesn't necessarily mean something in the room. I know I've covered this before, but it sometimes does hang people up. Spot something you were told that you found out to be true. Spot something you were told that you found out to be false, and you can just alternate those back and forth. And now, when we talk about, I'm not going to get a whole into this right now, but when we talk about analytical recall, it should be understood that when you spot something about it and notice something about it, and you alternate it, and you're working towards certain realizations, that is basically, there's no necessarily a set realization that here looking for the answer key somewhere in the back of the book, but in analyzing this stuff systematically, the awareness increase or the knowingness or the realizations occur when some kind of pattern forms, or you realize a certain tendency takes place, or when you were told something and it turned out to be false. All of those times might have something in common that you've been able to now observe or make note of, or a certain facet, versus the times you found that were told something and found out to be true. This is really just basically systematically putting you back in control of really the functions that the mind has been doing for you, and so forth, in terms of association and schemas and little data networks and file storage and all that kind of stuff. So there's no reason the alpha spirit can't handle the contents of the mental data bank, and it's actually, I say there's no reason they can't. It's the fact that they can't, that fragmentation exists, and the human condition is this compulsive nature that it is. As the seeker progresses along the pathway, more and more of the hiccups and the upsets of the human condition, the experience of life in general, they're able to be confronted as it is, and that means, again, how things actually are. Most of us have encountered at least one individual in our present lifetime that continually acts toward creating challenges and difficulties for you personally. Some individuals apply this effort to larger groups of people, or even society as a whole. Those maintaining higher levels of actualized awareness are generally in a better position to handle, such people directly, or at the very least, understand the situations that they're creating for themselves. So, a highly self-actualized individual doesn't succumb to suppression. Now, it's possible sometimes to win an enemy over, getting them to accept or agree with your side of reality. But if you maintain your own integrity or your position strongly or long enough, it's usually sufficient to just kind of drive them off, or simply wait them out until the matter is dropped. So sometimes it just requires being free of automatic reactive response mechanisms in order to really handle and confront suppression. So suppression's the next one we're going to take up here. There are those that there's unexpected or intense situations where an individual quickly can become overwhelmed, and the sense that one is basically become too much. Being overwhelmed would be becoming too much the effect of the environment or some kind of external source. So in that case, and we can just kind of put that, we have falsehoods with confusion, the overwhelm. So, the best course of action usually is generally to just remove yourself from the overwhelming influence and, catch your breath in a safe position. And this is different from withdrawal because ultimately, a high actualized person, being able to do this, being aware of what they need to do, they're just going to later confront it as it is. So, while you're operating through the human condition, the reason why you deal with the levels, working through the pathway material a few times and so forth, is because up to a certain point, processing doesn't really stop. You're basically just getting an education of it, and you're applying it, you're using it to basically overcome a certain, what we consider beta defragmentation, which is the compulsive experience of the human condition. But, this is all meant to re-educate, I guess, the spirit back to what it once knew and what was once doing knowingly, so that, of all of the information that I've come across really in my educational career in this lifetime, this is like the kind of stuff that might actually stick with you and something for you to be using and knowing in between lifetimes. So some of the other knowledge and invented knowledge and things that were invented to know about and treat in this physical world, it doesn't really do much good as an alpha spirit. When you're done with this body and you're trying to handle and manage spiritual existence, and so for the most part, people end up just kind of stuck back into it, and so that's what we're trying to kind of resolve here. So otherwise you'll end up having to come back, and then you're going to have to buy all these books all over again. So now one reason why persons and situations are so challenging for individuals to handle, and we mean like significantly overwhelming situations or very suppressive types of people, is again, and this just kind of becomes a broken record. That's why you can kind of start flying through this stuff much easier. It's restimulating older, fragmentation on a chain, stirring up turbulence from similar situations in the past that were left unresolved. See, it's not the stuff that's happened to us in the past that we dealt with. It's the stuff that we withdrew from and haven't confronted as it is, that keeps getting restimulated. See, we're only free of it when we're actually free of it. Just pretending to be free of it is not going to work. So there's also, on a physical level, we also have, I mean, to be quite honest, these games of enslavement and domination and so forth, these are as old as the backtrack itself. There are some individuals that carry, fragmented purposes along with them, and that's another, we have, just to differentiate, we have one's own goal or purpose. However, those can easily become fragmented, and we actually deal with goals and purposes at some considerable length farther up along the pathway. So, but there are simply some, because I think people spend too much time trying to understand, why is so and so that way, and so on and so forth, and at the same time not confronting the actual what is taking place. And so I think that kind of becomes a distraction here. Um, and so, I mean, the best we can explain is that there's because individuals carry goals over from various lifetimes, and fragmented purposes. These can be installed or maintained for countless, multiple universes of existence that an individual may, for some reason, be caring for, or they may be more recent than that. But regardless, there's some reason. And when we talk about, most of the time when we talk about games, we talk about rewards and various goals and whatnot. But in the physical universe, once the alpha spirits become compulsively attached to, uh, you know, to a body and has confused and misidentified its own nature with a body, a lot of the goals and purposes start being aimed at the survival of the body, which of course the alpha spirit themselves has no real need for survival, but for as a game condition. Uh, that's basically we've reached such a low state of game universes. That's pretty much all that's really taking place down here. It's not really that interesting of a game. So what ended up happening is, a lot of this, whether it's a goal, whether it was a true goal or not, the fact that it's what one's doing right now in this existence, in this lifetime, to basically just how to get the body along, which again isn't very enlightened or actualized either. So, this systemology work, I mean, I'm not just trying to blow my own trumpet here. It's one of the few worthwhile things that one can do for their own spiritual existence, beyond just this lifetime and this one game. Learn how the whole games operate and work, and how to even be free of one at choice, and then play whatever you want. You want to come back and play this game, play this game. I think there's better games though. So while it's easy to identify the most obvious situations where we've encountered something that's just blatant, it's most of you have experienced like covert attacks, the passive aggressive efforts of others and so forth that are still intending to dominate, or and remember we talked about this in a previous lesson. We're talking about invalidation. So, a suppressive individual or someone, giving us false information or overwhelming us or trying to dominate, it's the systematic root behind it is the invalidation, is invalidating us or our sense of knowingness or truth or something that we're trying to do. So, a personality or player that's of the suppressive type generally will just consistently try to invalidate, or we defined that in a previous lesson as basically to make less of. So to make less of, for example, their general aim for control. We talked about there's really only three things you can do to a system, which is stop, change, or start some aspect of the system. Their main aspect or aim of control is stopping action. So, stopping, inhibiting, invalidating, and so forth. These go against the basic nature of the alpha spirit. So, encounters with such types tend to leave us feeling depressed or hopeless, and yet they may also attempt to make us in some way, these individuals will try to make us dependent on them too, as another tactic. So, it's senseless to try to avoid all encounters with domination and competition in this universe. It's inherent part of the roles and the goals perceived as part of this game. But many players they're perceiving and operating with fragmented purposes. They don't, when they do that, they're not going to improve their experience, on the game of life. So the most desirable position or solution is really just be in good condition as an actualized seeker, or systemologist, if we're going to start using that term to classify people. But you beef up your own horsepower, and then this external other determined, the other people's crap efforts won't have an impact. They won't be invalidating you, because your level of awareness exceeds the degree or the level of energy or force that's being basically thrown at you. So, and you can, again, you get up to a high enough level of actualized awareness, and we're talking about still in this body. You don't have to be, teleporting somewhere else, but you basically, you defragmented it, as it happens, as you see it, you see it as it is and recognize it as it is while it's happening, and then you don't have fragmentation forming ever again. See, you clean up the place and you keep it clean, and then you don't got to go through that whole mess. You don't have to do this again. So just make sure you make it through. Stopping halfway on a ladder that's leaning against the sky is like being nowhere. So just keep plunging ahead. When we talk about suppression, suppressive control is aimed at, again, stopping motion. So there's there are ways of being constructively critical, but most criticism, again, is intended to invalidate, make less of, or blatantly make nothing of, another's efforts or creations. And really, it shouldn't matter. It really shouldn't matter, but of course we allow it to, and so it does affect our actions and our considerations there afterwards. It shouldn't matter what someone says or thinks or does, but that's just one of those things that mommy tells you as they push you out the door into the wolf world of the schoolyards and so forth. And just be yourself, and don't care what people say, and if someone does something to you, don't react. And so no, instead we got to sit through hours and hours and hours of Joshua Free's lectures to basically get this roundabout systematic way of having to do the same thing at a spiritual level. So, okay, suppression PCLs. We're going to use the word spot to apply this just in general, rather than recall. Recall generally, when we put recall into something that's objective like this, it's generally trying to bring something up or trying to bring an area to the surface. A spot technique, any of the spot techniques are actually intended to have advanced applications, which means they could be used for more than just this lifetime. When we were doing this 5 years ago, the way we were doing it prior was using imagine. So if we were trying to just get something or get someone to just kind of deal with an area, we'd do recall, and then once they had recalled enough of whatever, we'd do imagine and just kind of treat whatever they, we say imagine and we say create, but generally what's the case is there's a reactive creation that gets imagined, and so we end up just kind of processing that out as if it's anything else. So really any kind of reactive imagery is fragmentation as well, is imprinting or implanted. So until an individual could fully create something from scratch and not have, when you can create a castle, we talked about creation of space, or creating a mountain or creating a castle in it, without first having a picture of a mountain or a castle that you've already seen snap into your head, well, then you know that you're probably free of that kind of level of imprinting and fragmentation. But most individuals, you're going to have to work at stuff for a long time before you have that kind of control over the mind. So this is the only way I know to do it. We tried it all. We got all the books and went to all the sacred sites and all the missions and all the things and reduced every numerological equation of geometric whatever, and chanted every combination of vowels and Hebrew Semitic, and none of it resolved anything that was the target of ascending and actually getting out of the human condition. So whatever all that other stuff is, it is not this. And if it pretends to be, well, then we're trying to get rid of that right now. So now, suppression, stop. Spot a time when you stopped someone, spot a time when someone stopped you, spot a time when someone stopped another or others. And then we're throwing circuit 0 in on this one. Spot a time when you stopped yourself. Criticism. Time when you criticized someone criticized you, criticized yourself. So circuits on that. And validation. Spot a time when you made nothing of someone made nothing of you. Or you can, if that's too direct, you could say when someone tried to make nothing of, or so forth. We kind of get more into that on the pilot level of like the flight school and whatnot, because we've tried to select the best wording and the most appropriate gradient of direct PCLs, starting from the gradual to the direct and so forth. But really, there's a reason they're worded the way they are, so unless you have a good background on the theory and the research volumes and so forth, try not to modify it too much. So and why don't we take a break?
The Joshua Free Imprint, JFI Publications, in conjunction with Mardukite Academy and the Systemology Society, present the single greatest breakthrough of the 21st century for all humanity, the perfection of a new standard systemology, a complete map for the way out from the bottom to the top, and your key to being an ascended master in this lifetime. Everything you need is contained in 3 progressive, self-guiding courses: the Fundamentals of Systemology Basic Course, the Pathway to Ascension Professional Course, and the Keys to the Kingdom Advanced Training Course. And each should be studied and applied in their intended sequence and order as displayed in this video. All 3 courses combined are available as 5 standard hardcover volumes, but also as 33 installments, since each single course lesson is also available individually as a pocket-sized manual. The Fundamentals of Systemology Basic Course includes Being More Than Human, Realities in Agreement, Windows to Experience, Ancient Systemology, A History of Systemology, and Systemology Processing. The Pathway to Ascension Professional Course, including processing levels 0 through 6, includes in Volume 1, Increasing Awareness, Thought and Emotion, Clear Communication, Handling Humanity, Free Your Spirit, Escaping Spirit Traps, Eliminating Barriers, and Conquest of Illusion. The Pathway to Ascension Volume 2 includes Confronting the Past, Lifting the Veils, Spiritual Implants, Games and Universes, Spiritual Energy, Spiritual Machinery, The Arcs of Infinity, and Alpha Thought. The Keys to the Kingdom AT Advanced Training Course for Processing Level 7 in Volume 1 includes The Secret of Universes, Games, Goals, and Purposes, The Jewel of Knowledge, Implanted Universes, and the supplementals Systemology Biofeedback and Systemology Procedures. The Keys to the Kingdom AT Advanced Training Course for Processing Level 8 in Volume 2 includes Entities and Fragments, Spiritual Perception, Mastering Ascension, Advancing Systemology, and the AT Supplement Systemology Piloting. All titles are available from your favorite bookseller. Explore new standard systemology today, and may you never be the same.